and I'm going to try to do things at once. I'm going to throw the ball for the dogs and try to read. So hopefully it's not too distracting for anyone. It's probably going to be mostly distracting for me, to be honest with you. All right, let me get to the chapter. Sierra's relentless with her ball. She's like under my feet right now. Hold on, Cece. Hold down. Go drink water. She won't do it. She wants to wait till she's like barely breathing. Okay, we're reading The Relation to Self. Of course, there's some gems in this one too. Nowadays, more and more people, especially those who live in large cities, and this was written, I think I've mentioned this copyright before. Let me get the copyright. Copyright on this book is blah, blah, blah. Well, 2023, it says Bantam Books, but the original copyright is, do we have it? Where is it? 1964. Okay, so that's putting some things into perspective. My God. And who knows? I don't know when Carl Jung passed away. Nowadays, more and more people, especially those who live in large cities, suffer from terrible emptiness and boredom, as if they are waiting for something that never arrives. Movies and television, spectator sports, and political excitements may divert them for a while, but again and again, exhausted and disenchanted, they have to return to the wasteland of their own lives. The only adventure that is still worthwhile for modern man lies in the inner realm of the unconscious psyche. Oh, good, they're drinking water. With this idea vaguely in mind, many now turn to yoga and other Eastern practices. But these offer, okay, take a break. Take a break. We're done for now. Go take a break. Nope. You need to rest. You need to rest. Nope, you need to rest. But these offer no genuine new adventure, for in them one only takes over what is already known to Hindus or the Chinese without directly meeting one's own inner life center. While it is true, hold on, what happened there? Okay. Lay down. You need to relax. Good girl. While it is true that Eastern methods serve to concentrate the mind and direct it inward, and that this procedure is in a sense similar to the introversion of an analytical treatment, there is a very important difference. Jung evolved a way of getting to one's inner center and making contact with the living mystery of the unconscious, alone and unaided. This is utterly different from following a well-known path. Trying to give the living reality of the self a constant amount of daily attention is like trying to live simultaneously on two levels or in two different worlds. Sierra, you need to lay down and relax. You need to relax. You need to regulate your breathing. One gives one's mind, as before, to outer duties, but at the same time, one remains alert for hints and signs, both in dreams and in external events that the self uses to symbolize its intentions. The direction in which the life stream is moving. Mosquitoes are bad right now. Old Chinese texts that are concerned with this kind of experience often use the simile of the cat watching the mouse hole. One text says that one should allow no other thoughts to intrude, but one's attention should not be too sharp, nor should it be too dull. There is exactly the right level of perception. If the training is undergone in this manner, it will be effective as time goes on, and when the cause comes to fruition, like a ripe melon that automatically falls, anything you may happen to touch or make contact with will suddenly cause the individual's supreme awakening. This is the moment when the practitioner will be like one who drinks water and alone knows whether it is cold or warm. He becomes free of all doubts about himself and experiences a great happiness, similar to that one feels in meeting one's own father at the crossroads. Thus, in the midst of ordinary outer life, one is suddenly caught up in an exciting inner adventure. And because it is unique for each individual, it cannot be copied or stolen. I'm going to repeat that. And because it is unique for each individual, it cannot be copied or stolen. There are two reasons why man loses contact with the regulating center of his soul. One of them is that one single instinctive drive or emotional image can carry him into a one-sidedness that makes him lose his balance. This also happens to animals. For example, a sexually excited stag will completely forget hunger and security. This one-sidedness and consequent loss of balance are much dreaded by primitives who call it loss of soul. Another threat to the inner balance comes from excessive daydreaming, which in a secret way usually circles around particular complexes. In fact, daydreams arise just because they connect a man with his complexes. At the same time, they threaten the concentration and continuity of his consciousness. The second obstacle is exactly the opposite and is due to an overconsolidation of ego consciousness. Although a disciplined consciousness is necessary for the performance of civilized activities, we know what happens if a railway signalman lapses into daydreaming. It has serious disadvantages that is apt to block the reception of impulses and messages coming from the center. This is why so many dreams of civilized people are concerned with restoring this receptivity by attempting to correct the attitude of consciousness toward the unconscious center of self. Among the mythological representations of the self, one finds much emphasis on the four corners of the world, and in many I was looking at this picture. It's a winter landscape by the German artist Caspar Friedrich, which I did a whole essay on a picture, on a painting painted by him, Caspar Friedrich. He's standing on the ledge of an ocean, like a cliff overlooking an ocean. It's very dismal, and it's a landscape one too, but I wrote it really good. I was in a humanities class. I think I got an A on it. Hey, Bear Grylls. Good morning, good Sunday morning, at least it's morning here. I think it's morning. Yeah, 10 o'clock. So anyway, I was just reading about this picture by Caspar Friedrich, A Winter Landscape. And the segment I'm reading today is called The Relation to Self. Anyway, There are two reasons why a man loses contact with the regulating center of his soul. One of them is that some single instinctive drive or emotional image can carry him into one-sidedness that makes him lose his balance. This also happens to animals. For example, a sexually excited stag will completely forget hunger and security. This one-sidedness and consequent loss of balance are much dreaded by primitives. Freaking bite on my back. And consequent loss of balance are much dreaded by primitives who call it loss of soul. Another threat to the inner balance comes from excessive daydreaming, which in a secret way usually circles around particular complexes. In fact, daydreams arise just because they connect a man with his complexes. At the same time, they threaten the connection and continuity of his consciousness. The second obstacle is exactly the opposite and is due to an over-consolidation of ego consciousness. Although a disciplined consciousness is necessary for the performance of civilized activities, we know what happens if a railway signalman lapses into daydreaming. It has the serious disadvantage that it is apt to block the reception of impulses and messages coming from the center. This is why so many dreams of civilized people are concerned with restoring this receptivity by attempting to correct the attitude of consciousness toward the unconscious center of self. Among the mythological representations of the self, one finds much emphasis on the four corners of the world, and in many pictures, the great man is represented in the center of a circle divided into four. Jung used the Hindu word mandala, magic circle, to designate a structure of this order, which is symbolic representation of the nuclear atom of the human psyche, whose essence we do not know. In this connection, it is interesting that the Naskapi hunter pictorially represented his great man, not as a human being, but as a mandala. It reminds me, so one of the books I'm going to read is The Flower of Life. It's a great book. I've had to buy it like 3 separate times. I've moved so many times, and so much of my stuff is in storage. But that's a book I always keep on my shelf. Whereas the Naskapi experienced the inner center directly and naively without the help of religious rites or doctrines, other communities use the mandala motif in order to restore a lost inner balance. For example, the Navajo tribe, by means of mandala-structured sand paintings, to bring a sick person back into harmony with himself and with the cosmos, and thereby restore his health. So that's about energy too. Like, energy is so powerful. Like they say I know it works, when a lot of people at the same time pray or meditate, it changes things because that's a concentrated energy. It's really cool. I love it. And that's why we have to be so conscious of our thoughts. I mean, I have screwed myself by thinking things I wish I would have never thought, just because I was careless with my thoughts. I really work on that these days. Really pay attention. And when I catch myself in a storyline that doesn't feel good, I stop myself. I don't care if people think I'm delusional, but you have to face reality. Says who? I'll face the reality I want to. That there's justice in this world for people who treat other people poorly. There is justice. There is. That's the reality I'm going to focus on. Whereas just because on an outward appearance, their lives may look well polished and put together, doesn't mean they're not suffering on the inside because of their ill deeds. Whereas I can go to sleep at night peacefully because I have a clean conscience. I may not be living the most lavish life, but I have not purposely, intentionally fucked someone over. And if I've done it by accident, I've done everything in my power, within my own power, to correct that mistake. So I feel good about myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I have made lots of mistakes. I have acted out of character when I was in emotional pain, but I really do try to correct my mistakes. I don't just lay there and act like I didn't do shit that I didn't do and ruin someone else's life and not fucking try to make it right. Anyway, that's just my little rant. Whereas the Nascapi experienced the inner center. Oh, did I just read this? Okay, no, I didn't. Whereas the Nascapi experienced the inner center directly and naively without the help of religious rites or doctrines, other communities use the mandala motif in order to restore a lost inner balance. For instance, the Navajo tribe, by means of mandala-structured sand paintings. What is that? Ah! Spider web under the table. Whoops. Navajo tribe, by means of mandala-structured sand paintings, to bring a sick person back into harmony with himself and with the cosmos, and thereby restore his health. In Eastern civilizations, similar pictures are used to consolidate the inner being, or to enable one to plunge into deep meditation. The contemplation of a mandala is meant to bring an inner peace, a feeling that life has again found its meaning and order. The mandala also conveys this feeling when it appears spontaneously in the dreams of modern men who are not influenced by any religious tradition of this sort and know nothing about it. Perhaps the positive effect is even greater in such cases because knowledge and tradition sometimes blur or even block the spontaneous experience. An example of a spontaneously produced mandala occurs in the following dream of a 62-year-old woman. It emerged as a prelude to a new phase of life in which she became very creative. I see a landscape in a dim light. In the background, I see the rising and then evenly continuing crest of a hill. Along the line where it rises moves a quadrangular disc that shines like gold. In the foreground, I see a dark plowed earth that is beginning to sprout. Now I suddenly perceive a round table with a gray stone slab as its top. And at the same moment, the quadrangular disc suddenly stands upon the table. It has left the hill. But how and why it has changed its place, I do not know. Landscapes in dreams, as well as in art, frequently symbolize an inexpressible mood. In this dream, the dim light of the landscape indicates that the clarity of daytime consciousness is dimmed. Inner nature may now begin to reveal itself in its own light. So we are told that the quadrangular disc becomes visible on the horizon. Hitherto, the symbol of the self, the disc, has been largely an intuitive idea on the dreamer's mental horizon. But now, in the dream, it shifts its position and becomes the center of the landscape of her soul. As a seed sown long ago begins to sprout. For a long time previously, the dreamer had paid careful attention to her dreams, and now this work bears fruit. One is reminded of the relationship between the symbol of the great man and plant life, which I mentioned before. Now the golden disc suddenly moves to the right side, where things become conscious. Among other things, right often means psychologically the side of consciousness, of adaptation, of being right, while left signifies the sphere of unadapted, unconscious reactions, or sometimes even something sinister. Then, finally, the golden disc stops its movement and comes to rest on, significantly, a round stone table. It has found a permanent base. As Aniela Jaffe observes later in this book, roundness, the mandala motif, generally symbolizes a natural wholeness, whereas a quadrangular formation represents the realization of this in consciousness. In the dream, the square disc and the round table meet, and thus a conscious realization of the center is at hand. The round table, incidentally, is a well-known symbol of wholeness and plays a role in mythology. For instance, King Arthur's round table, which itself is an image derived from the table of the Last Supper. In fact, whenever a human being genuinely turns to the inner world and tries to know himself, where are you going, Cece? Just chill, you guys. Sit in the shade. We'll play again in a minute, okay? In fact, whenever a human being genuinely turns to the inner world and tries to know himself, not by ruminating about his subjective thoughts and feelings, but by following the expressions of his own objective nature, such as dreams and genuine fantasies, then sooner or later, the self emerges. I love that. I'm going to read that part again. Because sometimes we're shamed away from looking at our fantasies and looking at, what really makes us tick, because then it's considered bad. But that's who we are. So there's nothing to be ashamed of who we are. Big ups, Sarah. How you're having a beautiful... Oh, thanks. I am having a beautiful Sunday. It's hot out here. I have the dogs at the park. They ran just a minute ago, but I'm requesting they take a break. So let's see here. How's your Sunday, Mark? Let's see here. Now, where was I? In fact, whenever a human being genuinely turns to the inner world and tries to know himself, not by ruminating about his subjective thoughts and feelings, but by following the expressions of his own objective nature, such as dreams and genuine fantasies. Like, don't shame yourself away from who you really are, right? Don't let society tell you what's right and wrong. Figure it out yourself. It's so hard. It can be so hard. Then sooner or later, the self emerges. The ego will then find an inner power that contains all the possibilities of renewal. But there is a great difficulty that I have mentioned only indirectly up until now. This is that every personification of the unconscious, the shadow, the anima, the animus, and the self, has both light and dark aspects. We saw before that the shadow may be base or evil, an instinctive drive that one ought to overcome. It may, however, be an impulse toward growth that one should cultivate and follow. In the same way, the anima and animus have dual aspects. They can bring life-giving development and creativeness to the personality, or they can cause petrification and physical death. And even the self, the all-embracing symbol of the unconscious, has an ambivalent effect, as for instance in the Eskimo tale, when the little woman offered to save the heroine from the moon spirit, but actually turned her into a spider. The dark side of the self is the most dangerous thing of all, precisely because the self is the greatest power in the psyche. It can cause people to spin megalomaniac, and I wasn't sure what that meant, so I wrote it down. And it means a person who is obsessed with their own power. I know people like that. I'm sure we all know people like that. There's people in politics like that, obsessed with their own power. The dark side of the self is the most dangerous thing of all, precisely because the self is the greatest power in the psyche. It can cause people to spin megalomaniac or other delusory fantasies that catch them up and possess them. A person in this state thinks with mounting excitement that he has grasped and solved the great cosmic riddles. He therefore loses all touch with human reality. A reliable symptom of this condition is the loss of one's sense of humor and of human contact. Thus, the emerging of the self may bring great danger to the man's conscious ego. The double aspect of the self is beautifully illustrated by this old Iranian fairy tale called The Secret of the Bath Badgurd. The great and noble prince Hatim Tai receives orders from his king to investigate the mysterious Bath Badgurd, castle of non-existence. When he approaches it, having gone through many dangerous adventures, he hears that nobody ever returned from it, but insists on going on. He is received at a round building by a barber with a mirror who leads him into the bath. But listen to all that symbolism. Mirror. Mirror. That's a symbolism right there. Who leads him into a bath, but as soon as the prince enters the water, a thunderous noise breaks out and it gets completely dark. The barber disappears and slowly the water begins to rise. Hatim swims desperately around until... What is this story from again? Iranian fairy tale. Interesting. But as soon as the prince enters the water, a thunderous noise breaks out and it gets completely dark. The barber disappears and slowly the water begins to rise. Hatim swims desperately round until the water finally reaches the top of the round cupola, which forms the roof of the bath. Now he fears he is lost, but he says a prayer and grabs the center stone of the cupola. Again, a thunderous noise. Everything changes and Hatim stands alone in the desert. After a long and painful wandering, he comes to a beautiful garden in the middle of which is a circle of stone statues. In the center of the statues, he sees a parrot in its cage, and a voice from above says to him, "O hero, you probably will not escape alive from this bath." Once Geomart, the first man, found an enormous diamond that shone more brightly than the sun and moon. He decided to hide it where no one can find it, and therefore he built this magical bath in order to protect it. The parrot that you see here forms part of the magic. At its feet lie a golden bow and arrow on a golden chain, and with them you may try 3 times to shoot the parrot. If you hit him, the curse will be lifted. If not, you will be petrified, as were all these other people. Hatim tries once and fails. His legs turn to stone. He fails once more and is petrified up to his chest. The 3rd time he shuts his eyes, exclaiming, "God is great," shoots blindly, and this time hits the parrot. An outbreak of thunder, clouds of dust. When all this has subsided, in place of the parrot is an enormous, beautiful diamond, and all the statues have come to life again. The people thank him for their redemption. The reader will recognize the symbol of the self in this story, the first man, Geomart, the round mandala-shaped building, the center stone, and the diamond. But this diamond is surrounded by danger. The demonic parrot signifies the evil spirit of imitation that makes one miss the target and petrify psychologically. As I pointed out earlier, the process of individuation excludes any parrot-like imitation of others. Time and time again, in all countries, people have tried to copy in outer or ritualistic behavior, the original religious experience of their great religious teachers, Christ or Buddha or some other master, and therefore have become petrified. To follow in the steps of a great spiritual leader does not mean that one should copy and act out the pattern of their individuation process made by his life. It means that we should try with a sincerity and devotion equal to his to live our own lives. The barber with mirror who vanishes symbolizes the gift of reflection that Hatim loses when he wants it most. The rising waters represent the risk that one may drown in the unconscious and get lost in one's emotions. In order to understand the symbolic indications of the unconscious, one must be careful not to get outside of oneself or beside oneself, but to stay emotionally with oneself. Indeed, it is vitally important that the ego should continue to function in normal ways. Only if I remain an ordinary human being, conscious of my incompleteness, can I become receptive to the significant contents and processes of the unconscious. But how can a human being stand the tension of feeling himself at one with the whole universe, while at the same time he is only a miserable, earthly human creature? If, on the one hand, I despise myself as merely a statistical cipher, my life has no meaning and is not worth living. But if, on the other hand, I feel myself to be part of something much greater, how am I to keep my feet on the ground? It is very difficult indeed to keep these inner opposites united within oneself without toppling over into one or the other extreme. It's a good one, huh? Okay, that's it for today. The next one is the social aspect of the self. I'm going to give you guys a little treat today. I'm going to let you watch me throw the ball for my dogs. Here we go. Dun, da, 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 da. This is the excitement of my life. Whoops. Let's see if I can get this. What happened here? Okay. Try to get this thing to stand up without toppling over, like they talk about in the book. Let me see. All right, Cece. Ready? Sierra. Ready? Fat boy, where's your ball? Where's the other ball? Where's the other ball? Fat boy, where's your ball? Where's your ball, fatty? Where's the other ball? I need 2 balls. If you guys want to play, you have to produce 2 balls. Dos. Where's the other? Come on, man. They're both missing now? What's wrong with you guys? There's the blue one. Here. Fat boy, where's your ball? Ready? Sierra, that's your ball. Fat boy, where is your ball? No, you guys are ridiculous. Where's the other ball? There it is. Good job. Ready? Let's see if we can do a big jump. Nice. Where's your ball, Patty? She's a good jumper, huh? Sierra's a good jumper. I'm gonna throw yours, Fatty. There goes Fatty. Fat boy don't jump. But Sierra does. All right, that's it. Everyone have a wonderful, beautiful, blessed Sunday. Lights.